Dutch Merrick, ask him a few questions. Maybe he can help us out. He's a former president of the entertainment union IATSE, Local 44 property craft persons, and a prop master who has worked in the film and television industry for decades. He's currently working on the HBO series Euphoria, and HBO is, of course, owned by Warner Media, the same parent company as CNN. So good to see you, Dutch.
Hi, Fredricka. Thank you very much for having me at this really hard time.
It is a hard time, I know, especially for Helena Hutchins' family, and of course the whole family of the movie making industry. And so many of us don't really know all the intricacies of what it is to make a movie, a film. And so we hope you can help us out here. So much does go into the making of a film. So much time, so much care, so much preparation. So how could something like this happen in your view, where a gun is fired for a scene, for rehearsal, and then someone dies?
Well, and I just want to preface it by saying that Hollywood really is a family, and the shockwaves of this have reverberated throughout the industry. You know, Hollywood sets the standard, and worldwide people watch us. We haven't had a gun death in Hollywood in 28 years, and that's for a good reason, because we are a very, very safe industry. Everything we do is checked and checked and checked, and we deal with very actually dangerous things. You see the car crashes in the movies that are real. People standing on a mountaintop is real. Kayakers, motorcycle riders, and firearms are real, and it's that level of real that gives the authenticity to the show. We have so many safety checks in place for firearms in particular, safety bulletins that come down through the industry, and the armorers are very cautious about handling the ammunition and the guns. We block out each scene very carefully before they film. My understanding from this situation is this was during a rehearsal. So we rehearse often again and again when you're dealing with firearms before you load the gun, before you actually go hot, as we call it. And it's unconscionable that that gun, one, was hot at all with a blank, but much less with a live round. That's the question on everyone's mind right now, is why was there live ammunition on a film set? Because that is absolute taboo. We've been filming for 100 years using blank ammunition, and it's been proven safe again and again and again. The show that I work on right now, Euphoria, Sam Levinson, the showrunner director, and he demands authenticity down to every T is crossed and I is dotted. And so we use real firearms whenever possible, and whenever there's a firearm brought out on set, he makes sure there's an actual armorer, not just a prop person or crew person, but an armorer with the gun to make sure that we are the utmost of safety. And we block every scene, and we know in advance where the actors are pointing, when they're going to pull the trigger, where the cameras are placed. And the safety procedures also extend to the camera department. It used to be you had to have an operator on the eyepiece, on the lens, and a focus puller next to the lens. That's two people right next to the camera. But with the current technology, when we film scenes, oftentimes we can put a camera on a remote control and have an operator 10, 20, 30 feet away who's looking at a monitor, and a focus puller working on a remote head, and there's nobody next to the camera when it's being fired.
And I know, Dutch, you were not on the set of Rust when this happened on Thursday, but can you give us an idea of when you have a rehearsal involving a firearm, and again, we don't know all the details about the weapon, or whether indeed there were live rounds, or if this is an accident as a result of blanks. We just don't have that concrete information. But can you give us an idea at this juncture, generally, when there is going to be a rehearsal, because I have seen reportedly that this was a rehearsal for this scene too. What are the steps that might take place before the gun is even handed to the actor? I mean, you mentioned the armorer, but there are quite a few people involved. Is that the case, to handle this weapon, to double check, triple check before the actor gets it, even for a rehearsal?
Generally speaking, the process is the actors will rehearse dialogue and they won't even find their marks. And then they'll walk through and do what we call a blocking rehearsal. So the actor will find their marks here, they'll figure out where they maybe want to put the camera, and they'll rehearse that a number of times with no guns at all. And if they need something because the scene requires it, we can give them a dummy gun if need be, or a cold gun, an empty gun if we have to. But generally we rehearse without a gun or with a dummy gun. And then we'll block it out with the entire crew. Then the crew gets a chance to look at the department heads. We'll watch the blocking and see where the actor's standing, where the camera's going, and then they can come in and do the lighting and shape the light and figure out where the microphones are going. Then, when everyone's absolutely ready, the very last thing we do is the armorer will go in, make the gun hot, meaning load the blanks into the gun, offer it to the actor. The actor has an opportunity to inspect it. The first AD who runs the set has an opportunity to inspect it. And then we'll say we've gone hot. They'll roll camera. We'll film. They'll finish the scene. And then the very first thing that happens after that is the armorer will go in and take the weapon and clear it and call it out before anybody moves and make sure it's entirely safe. Then the first AD calls the set clear. Then everybody can go in and do whatever job they need to do. The information that we're hearing that's come through the affidavits is that the first AD himself picked a gun up off a cart without supervision of an armorer, handed it to Alec Baldwin, didn't check it. It turned out to be the worst case scenario, a loaded gun with a real bullet, which is the biggest mystery of all. But a first AD has no business taking anything off an armorer's cart and handing it to an actor. That has armorers just beside themselves why an AD would feel compelled to do that. And my guess is that they're crunched for time and trying to get things done quickly, and they're cutting corners. When you're working 16, 18 hours a day, and a lot of the crew walked off that morning. The entire camera crew walked off that morning citing gun safety.
And in fact,
they had been doing extremely long days.
Oh, apologize for interrupting. I was about to ask you that about the, assistant director. You mentioned the AD, the armorer. I mean, the sequence of events of handling the weapon. And then what about the prop master, or is that interchangeable with the armorer? I mean, because there seem to be a lot of roles, different people who might have their hands on the weapon. And then, I mean, we still don't know if this was a live round. What was in this gun?
Well, the chain of command is such that the prop master is the head of the department. They're ultimately in charge for the entire department. And many prop masters have their firearms permits and will run the guns on set, and they're perfectly entitled to do it. And on a larger show, or if a prop master is not set up to do guns or not comfortable with guns, they'll hire an armorer who that's their entire job, is only to deal with the guns. And definitely on a larger show, you specifically have an armorer to that. And they stay next to the cart. They keep the guns in their charge at all times. The cardinal sin is having live ammunition anywhere on a film studio or near a film set. It's hard to, anything would be speculation at this point.
Sure.
My understanding is that the armorer, the young gal that was running the show, it was her second or third show as yes, it was her second or third show as a sort of a department head for the armor. So she may have assisted in the past. I don't know exactly what her history was, but this was one of her first shows to really be the bottom line, the department head. And her father was a sort of a trick shooter, a Wild West trick shooter, and he would work with actors and teaching them that sort of stuff. And you're out in the desert in New Mexico. We're thinking of 100 scenarios. Maybe she showed some trick shooting with live rounds. We don't know. Why was there live rounds? Were the guns unattended and someone put a live round in? That is the mystery. We're waiting with bated breath for the investigators to find out why in God's name a real round. I did bring some blank rounds to show you if it's something you want to see.
Oh. Well, show us real quick, because we are right up against a break.
Yeah. This is called a 5-in-1 round. It's designed for most Western shoots use this. It works in a lot of Western rifles and pistols. And you'll notice the front of it is crimped. There's a little pinch in the brass, and it's entirely inert. So there's gunpowder, there's a primer, it will spark and it'll fire and cause flame, but nothing's supposed to come out of the barrel. So it's very obvious to an armor or a prop person the difference between a bullet and a blank. again, when you're working the kind of long hours that they were, people are tired, they're stressed, the crew wasn't paid for 3 weeks, and a lot of them walked. The conditions were a perfect storm. But in Hollywood, we literally expend millions of rounds of blank ammunition. I say millions, I mean millions with an M, that is safe every single day, and we do it day in and day out without an injury, and that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
We block it out, we're careful, we check and double check, and it's a very safe industry. This instance is an anomaly that we should not compare. It doesn't compare with what the standard checks are.
Yeah.
We do it every single day, all over LA and all over the country.
It's extraordinarily sad. You made reference to, you know, Hannah Gutierrez's dad. I mean, he's legendary, Thel Reed. But again, we don't know exactly what happened yet involving anybody, whatever decisions or anything just yet. The investigation's still in its infancy. Dutch Merrick, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.